right, welcome back to the Cannabis Conversations. I am the fortunate and lucky host of today's show, Sean Welsh. Today's guest is on the front end of all things policy in America around hemp. But as you know, here in season 2, we must start off with being grateful to that of our sponsor. And today's show is sponsored by Potency 710. That is a plant power purpose-driven skincare line, and they're unbelievable. If you don't know their founder, Mandy Lyle, you need to. What she's doing right now in the space is unbelievable, using this plant to beautify not just women, by the way. I myself use the Potency 710 product. So it isn't just that. She's giving away her Luxe travel pack with today's show, okay? Today's show, all people have a chance to enter to win this pack. Good, worth over $70. It also comes with a membership to her community, which, again, if you're in the health and wellness space, you want to be there. So do yourself a favor. Head over to the Cannabis Combos IG page. Get more details on this giveaway because, well, I think even my guest might have an opinion on the giveaway. She may have already gotten a taste of it. But for those of you who don't know, the woman sitting to my computer right, as again, I don't know how this will come on your phone, but to my computer right, Hunter Buffington. Hunter, how are you today?
I'm spectacular. Hope everybody else is doing just as well.
We hope the same, and we're so grateful for you to take your time to join us today. And I am grateful to our sponsor. I'm glad that we lined it up with you because I think that it's a perfect mix between what is important to you and important to Miss Mandy. So I'm really happy for that. Hunter, we like to kick off all of our shows with how you found this wonderful plant, whether it was when you stumbled into it recreationally as a kid or when you realized it had medical value, maybe in your early, late 20s. So we're here to hear the story of Hunter and the plant. Take it away.
So I really have a couple of intersections with cannabis, and I think we're gonna talk about some of that in the second portion. But I grew up in Wyoming from a cattle ranching family, have family in South Dakota, also pushing cows. And my first business when I was 15 was training horses. I broke a lot of horses, rode a lot of naughty animals that were deeply loved by their owners, but just needed some schooling, if you will. And when I was 18, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary disease, which as some of your female listeners may know, can be just incredibly painful. And it made training horses not only difficult, but potentially life-threatening. My reaction time was so slow, or I was in too much pain to be able to do my job and connect with the horses and be quick enough, right, to get them through their schooling sessions. That was a huge problem. My doctors had prescribed pretty intense painkillers that really just disabled me for all intensive purposes. So again, had no mechanism to treat myself and continue my job or even my lifestyle. And a lot of my friends that I was coming up with in the community were just dumbfounded and continued to say, why don't you just try smoking some weed, right? Like try the pot. And again, because it was really, vilified in the Western community, I was really hesitant. So when I tried it, it was phenomenal. Part of being able to inhale the medicine is that it's quite quick, right? You have control over how much you're going to take, and you can go anywhere from just a head change to, treating pain or medicinal properties like that. And it enabled me to continue my job, to be around the horses and do what I loved. And many of your listeners might find this funny, but I became a huge fan of spliffs because then I could partake and it would smell like tobacco, and most folks would not have any idea that I was actually taking medicine. So
yeah, look, you got to get it where you can get it, right? And staying away from it. It's interesting, right? You talk about the vilification process of the plant itself and what we've dealt with. I'm early 40s, so I'm somebody who has, sort of been in that vilification process. as a young kid, and knew it was something that would work for me. I found it recreationally, but as I've stated before, it became medically obvious to me as a migraine sufferer by the age of 17 that this was going to be a much better route than what you had discussed with me pre-show, which was that gigantic list, right, of medication, of pain meds or things to deal with this or to deal with that, right, and how expensive those things can be. But beyond the expense, talk to me real fast about what you were mentioning about just the inability to do what needed to be done, and how that was something that was so important. Obviously, you can't break an animal of their bad habits if you're not on time with your reaction, right? I'm a big dog lover and I train my dogs, and it's the same thing. If you're not a step ahead, you're a step behind, which means that, behavior is never corrected. How did you realize that for yourself? And is this, I don't want to get too personal, and if we did, stop me, but is this something that you had talked with your folks and were like, look, this is a thing, I don't want to deal with this anymore? Or can you just give me a little bit of context into that part of it?
Yeah, it was really interesting for me because in my own experience, and you made the DARE drug education, which is, I learned much more about drugs through DARE than I ever knew.
Nothing made me want to do drugs more in my life than the DARE program. Like, my wife and I have this thing where it's like, don't tell us no, right? And definitely don't tell us that it's going to kill us without giving us the why, the how, and the where. And when I was immediately turned on by all things automatically. Yes, 110%.
I mean, I don't know about you, but we had the whole display. Like, they literally.
It was a weekly thing. It was a weekly thing, bringing the dog in with the vest on and the whole. I mean, it was I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. It was a weekly thing. That is just so pageantry based, it's not even like reality of what kids should be hearing about, like in that direct order, and avoiding things like alcohol and cigarettes because of their viability to the community at that time. So yeah, it's a joke, DARE, but no, DARE I think led a lot of us to trying drugs. I realized early on, I mean, I had my first hit of acid before I turned 16, and that's not a brag, it's just simply the point is that I realized if I allowed myself to expand my mind, how inexpensively one could do so if you could harness it. And so by 17, 18, I had it harnessed. I was taking peyote in the desert by 19 because I knew where I wanted to go. So Hunter, with you in this process, being that you couldn't be public about the cannabis side, I assume you're still under a parental watch when you make these decisions. What happens there?
Yeah, it was intense. And I was in the public eye as a rodeo queen. That's one of my secrets. So now you know a secret, Sean. Well, I guess.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll try not to tell anyone, right? I'll do my best, but
too late.
I have to put it in my notes. I'm sorry, and then I have to circle it. That's an important one. So, okay.
Right. So, but then my family, it was really interesting because I never discussed it with my family. That came much later in my career, and my grandparents never understood it. Still trying to communicate that. But my uncle, my favorite uncle, of course, because that's how it works, he ended up having liver and kidney disease. And so he was in California and able to participate in some of the medical clubs there. And so he and I were very open and talked about it a lot. And we did try to educate my family about it, but they chose ignorance as bliss. Really, I think that it was easier for them to just go la 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 than to change their entire mindset. Right.
But let's talk about that, right? Because I think that happens a lot to people, and I think there's a lot of frustration from advocacy that people would rather just turn a blind eye. But I will say that indifference, to me, at some level in this particular discussion, is better than some sort of negative connotation that I'm going to die from what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is a worse idea than using pharmaceuticals. Like that, to me, I would almost take indifference over trying to fearmonger me into, which my parents, when I brought it to them, I only brought it to them because I had met with a bunch of migraine specialists in Chicago, and they were like, "You do what?" I'm like, "Yeah, I use cannabis." They're like, "Oh my God, no, you have to use these 17 medications. That's insane. That will never work for you." And I'm like, it's been working. Like you guys just gave me a headache. When I leave here, I'm smoking a joint. By the time I get home, I won't have said headache. So we're going to move on with our lives. And when I brought it to my folks, my dad was in Vietnam. So he was fairly like indifferent, culturally speaking. He was like, whatever, I get it. My mom was kind of the fear-ish, but I'd already failed the drug test for like the Holiday Inn server job, like you already had to explain to your mom when she picked you up at 15, that like you were in the wrong room of people, and she'd look at you and go, I was born yesterday, but it wasn't the day before, whatever her saying was, I was born in the dark, but it wasn't yesterday. Right. And so, they evolved though. And I remember my mom shattering my first piece she found, and my dog had dug up a bag of weed that I had hidden under a carpet, in my room. And it just like, I remember all those things. And now the woman's asking me for edibles, and so I love the fact that we've been able to like do this, but it's not always that way, Hunter, is it?
It's not. And it's ironic because I am always slipping them really my favorite hemp products, right? CBD tinctures and lotions. And my mother-in-law would be like, you're still on the pot, bless her soul. But she would tell me all the time that she was from the disco era. So there wasn't anything that she hadn't done at least twice, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. I mean, again, I'd rather be on the pot than the coke, you know what I mean? Like from a living perspective of the disco era. But
but my mom's the opposite. She has dug in, and if you want to hear the most like just rhetoric, right? Just a brick wall of rhetoric. That's where my mom is. So is
it an avoidance then, Hunter? I'm not trying to be your therapist, but is it an avoidance for you in conversation? Do you just completely steer clear? And again, does your job being in the space, does this create more chaos in your life, or how does one manage a stone wall of that on that end?
It's just really interesting because we also don't agree on climate, right? On the need for mitigation of climate change, on sustainability. If you want to know what the hardened conservative living in Wyoming thinks about anything, I've got a prime example for you. She's just there. And to be honest, if I can get her to take the lotions and use them, and she willfully ignores what is on the label, I just count it as a win. So,
right. So if you could sneak the potency 710 by the radar as just a wonderful female product without the ingredient list, I do love that. But I'll say, I've
long thought about making brownies and just giving her some brownies, but I don't think it's appropriate to do that without someone's knowledge.
So yeah, Hunter, I have to tell you, as I told you earlier, in my mind expansion journey, I've always been open to it. And I wasn't fortunate. I missed the last Grateful Dead show in Chicago by like a 40-minute ride. I missed guys coming through, whatever it was. So the first time they ever came back was in the Midwest here at Alpine Valley. And we went with a bunch of buddies, and we were having a ball. You know what I mean? Mushrooms for breakfast, joints for, after breakfast. It was beautiful. About an hour into the show, a young lady walked past me, and I felt cold water run down my back from a sponge. And I was like, oh my God, this girl was heavenly. I turned around and said, thank you so much. She goes, you'll thank me in about 30 minutes. And I said, what's that? She said, oh, just a little bit of liquid fun in there. I'm like, okay, not cool. So all I have to know now is how long. She's like 8 to 10 hours. I'm like, okie dokie. All right. And so I can mentally prepare. But to your point, forced consumption, not cool at any level for anyone ever. And that's to anyone listening. Like, if you deal with people who are totally against it, even that is a joke, right? Grateful Dead did it to the Saturday Night Live people way back in the day. They did it to the Playboy Mansion. It's not funny, right? It takes people in a different place. You have to be ready to use drugs. So that's like a bad name thing. But Hunter, back to mom briefly. Is it generational, right? Because you said grandma and grandpa also really don't have it. So is it generational in that way, or is just mom the one stuck in the mud with that? It doesn't, your grandparents are more indifferent or just don't get it.
Yeah, no, I think it's partially generational, but I think it's also, and this is a really interesting thing that's happening with the states versus federalism and like all the policy stuff too. Yeah. But there's a conservative and also Western, right? I mentioned the Western way of life, right? And so that is very much the antithesis of, free thinking kind of hippie. They would definitely be like, we're not hippies, right? That's kind of a line.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said Western twice now, and every time you say it, I'm like, Hunter, I lived in Colorado for like 8 years, and the Western vibe, like being from Chicago, I thought I was in a whole other world. And people thought I was from another world because they're like, you want to do things
Right.
too fast. You expect too much of
Too
us. And I'm like,
fast,
what are you
right?
talking
Too
about? Like, this is how I grew
open-minded.
up, right? So when you say
Tradition is
Western, but
incredibly
you're
important.
talking Western ranching, which is not people, ranchers are not like you see on, maybe on Yellowstone. But the point is, it's a lifestyle. It is a way of life that's been going on for generations. This isn't like a new thing that popped up. And so conservatism seems to run a little bit more thorough there than potentially other setups. Is that fair?
I mean, I think when it comes to a relationship with marijuana, right, that is absolutely yes. But amazingly, what I have seen is when it comes to health products, and especially health products for horses, because horses are really prone and highly impacted with inflammation, right? They live on their feet. They spend their entire life really on their feet. And so if they have inflammation, it's 4 times worse, right, than what we experience. And so it's been amazing to see the horse world as early adopters for some of these products for their horses. CBD is, you have to be careful. So for folks out there, there's some opportunities to use it. If you're showing your horses, then you need to be mindful of where your jurisdiction, how they feel about it, so that you're not accused of doping your horse. But I will say that if you have horses that have founder hoof issues, right, they're older geriatric horses, retired race horses, what we've seen as far as the outcomes when we use specifically hemp products is phenomenal. There's a required ingredient, fatty acid, that horses have to have, that's in the hemp oil seed. So there's a new level of adoption when it comes to really keeping your horses at the highest performance and as comfortable as possible. But that's also one of the things that I really love about the Western heritage, is that it really is very much a lifestyle that's invested in your animals, right? Like,
and that's what stands out to me. The way you're talking about the horses is how we talk about how we talk about dogs. You know what I mean? And I think that's really, really super awesome to have. And the product use, that is awesome to do. Do you have any specific call outs of products that you've used that you want to mention here, Hunter? I only ask because, it seems like something people would be definitely interested in. So is there anything specifically there?
Yeah, I work with a fantastic group of folks in Nevada. It's regenerative agriculture that they practice there. They have cattle and horses, and a phenomenal product, one that is for maintenance, and then another Tranquil that is for horses that are experiencing high anxiety. Anybody out there that has a barrel horse or a roping horse that has to settle in the box and then go as fast as they can in the next 13 seconds. A lot of those horses, of course, experience anxiety in the box or when they're traveling, but its Element is the name, in Nevada, Fallon, Nevada, and it's a phenomenal product. I have a number of ambassadors that I work with in the equine industry who love that product. And as I said, it's regeneratively grown. They really care about what's in that product. And I've seen some pretty amazing results come from it as well.
Well, we'll make sure that the social team gets them tagged and linked up on this, because that's the kind of reason we're here. Those are the kind of pieces of nuggets I want people to hear, because I know we got horse fans, because I know friends of mine watch the show that have horses. So these conversations are bigger than that, and they're better than that. But it does kind of weave into some policy things I wanted to ask you. I took a note here. You said that you were going to have the ingredient list. And I feel like you said that because it's a hemp product, and I feel like that's because it's under FDA looking, because it's a federal product. Is that the case? Because we realize that cannabis not being federal has nothing to do with the FDA.
Oh man. So the FDA is all up in here, and amazingly has done almost nothing simultaneously. It's this pretty crazy scenario that we found ourselves in. The states are incredibly active. The departments of agriculture want farmers farming hemp. They want to be able to process hemp seed just like any other oil seed. But FDA is using words like zero tolerance. And when we're talking about contaminants, because in grain products, so specifically the grain product, right? The grain does not produce cannabinoids. So there's no naturally occurring cannabinoids in the seed. Any of those cannabinoids are literally a contaminant from being so closely in touch with the flower and the leaf, right? That resin's incredibly sticky. So to use words like zero tolerance, and then to propose limits of THC and CBD, both below the amount of arsenic and lead that's allowed in animal feed, is really unpalatable, to say the least. And when I say that FDA is all over this with zero tolerance, the statements that they can't regulate, that they need an entirely new agency or division to actually regulate these products, especially CBD, in my opinion, they're acting like the sky is falling instead of doing their job, because we know how to regulate supplements, right? We know how to regulate cosmetics.
I mean, look, you know how to regulate any side of oil. You've already mentioned 3 other different ones, right? Like there's already a playbook here. I don't know why the plant, being a plant that has other values and can do other things, don't blame the plant. Just embrace it and just put it in the same line of communication as anything else. I mean, I had Kim Stuck on the show. I don't know if you know her, a policy lady also out there in Colorado. And she's like, dude, it's easier for people to get away with so many other things because it's not related to cannabis. And, cannabis is feeling like they're the most regulated when in reality they're just not. They have the most hyperbole around them. They have the most discussion around their regulation. But she was saying, packaged food people are the most highly regulated. And if cannabis gets federally legalized, that the FDA could step in. But Hunter, your point is they're already saying on the hemp side that they're not prepared, let alone the cannabis side. How is this possible? And it's not like this is new news. I mean, Colorado was 2014. So we're a decade of legal use. It feels like just government nonsense.
I mean, so to that point, we just said we know how to regulate supplements. We definitely know how to regulate food. And the history of hemp production in the United States, and I'm going to use hemp specifically because we even we lifted prohibition, right? So that we could grow hemp for our activities in the war. But our relationship with hemp goes further back even than the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. This is an American crop, a commodity crop that was villainized. And because we experienced prohibition with the Marijuana Tax Act, and then all of the laws that govern food and drugs and supplements came after prohibition occurred, then all of the hemp products were locked out. So in spite of this millennial long relationship we've had, eating it, drinking teas with it, perhaps smoking it, although I think that our original relationship was far more nutritional and around textile, at least initially.
Yeah, far more agriculturally driven. I have zero doubt about how the American Indians would have gone about utilizing this product previous to all of us getting here and doing what we did.
And all of the better living through chemistry, right? But this is a long-term relationship. And I believe that the FDA is treating it like it's something they've never seen before. And the problem is that, again, as I mentioned, when we are regulating what is a contaminant and far below any therapeutic dose, because we know what the therapeutic dose is for THC and CBD. And yes, it can be highly variable for an individual, but it's 1,000 times orders of magnitude difference. These are trace amounts. And you heard me mention the limits that are being proposed for animal feed, for hemp seed meal, is less than arsenic and lead. We don't have labels on our food that say lead free, right? But there's an entire movement that feels that they need to label these products as THC free. Meanwhile, gluten under 20 ppm, right? 0.002%, right? You can label that as gluten free. And yet here we are, very concerned over these tiny, tiny amounts. And what that means for supplements and therapeutic applications is just as concerning. We should keep an eye on that. Because if they're that concerned that they want to say zero, right? What does that actually mean for being able to use this plant without a doctor's prescription? Because that's
and the idea of zero anything or 100% of anything is nonsense. Like, I live in a world of data for my living. Like, that's what I do, is I pour over lines of data every single day. And if I ever see 100, or if I ever see a zero, I throw it out.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I throw out things that are 95 and 5, because at the end of the day, the majority of life happens in the middle, no matter what it is. And so to hear you talk about the grain feed and the arsenic and the lead and the idea that things don't have to be labeled one way, but for this plant, we have to make sure. It kind of makes me think about how I've had people in the past, been fortunate, been in the background of this industry I got my medical permit in like 06 in Colorado. So like, I've been around the back end of it. We helped get websites up in 08 for dispensaries. So like, before people even noticed what was going on, we were there. And I've been fortunate to know a lot of people. So over the years, someone had sent me a couple of like, hemp pre-rolls, And so I was like, oh, cool. Like, let's give it a shot. I got to be honest with you. Not for me. It just was, because I've been a cannabis user for so long, and it was sort of like this weird middle ground. It's like I tell people, don't use ecstasy, either use mushrooms or smoke weed, but don't like ruin your brain with that. And keep it natural. That's kind of where I was like, dude, I'm not really feeling it. I'm not really understanding it. But that shouldn't make it any less of something that's available to use. You're trying to use it agriculturally speaking. And I think that's where a lot of this discussion is totally blown out. And so, Hunter, I have to ask you, being that I live in Wisconsin, agricultural state, we're ag first. I'm not here to argue the point, but is there someone bigger behind the scenes that doesn't, like, I don't know, cornfields? I remember reading a statistic that corn farmers would be better turning their fields over to hemp, for penny, like on the money, on the dollar, in today's world than they ever have been. Is there a bigger force that pushes this, that doesn't want to see hemp be this? Is there a bigger name out there that doesn't want us to be a part of the conversation like this?
I'm so excited that you asked me that, Sean, because I think when we're talking about the Marijuana Tax Act, there was definitely a lot of pressure coming from other commodities. But from my experience, now that we know more about the damage that monoculture agriculture, has done, when we explore how hemp can be utilized as a rotational crop in partners with other crops, what it does for the soil, and in fact for production yields for a lot of these partner crops, is phenomenal. Yeah. And the cotton industry is embracing hemp, because adding hemp at different levels opens up a whole new spectrum of textile properties for them. So I would say that on the agriculture side, that's not where I think the pressure is actually coming from. I don't think it's an agriculture issue, actually. I think where we're getting the pushback is from the folks that got Epidiolex approved the same year that we got grass notices, so that you and I could eat hemp hearts and hemp seed protein. Another thing that I think is happening, remember, maybe not, but some of your listeners will probably remember a couple of years ago, there was the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and cannabis conversation. They were talking about making that new agency. And I just think that it's a very convenient package that tells you really where the pressure and perhaps the political capital is coming from. And if you think about where the complaint is with hemp, when I say hemp, I would be really curious how many of your listeners automatically go, oh yeah, hemp-derived intoxicants, right? D8.
Yeah, no, right. And that's that we're here, Hunter, on that point where I'm not talking about. As a matter of fact, it's the most annoying part of hemp, if I'm being straight with you. Living in a prohibition state as I do, walking around or seeing places that are calling themselves dispensaries or putting up cannabis leaves or even using the frickin' word cannabis, living here, me knowing that is a crock of shit. You're out here lying to people. You're misrepresenting a point. You're not helping. And that's where I think this discussion, people are looking at it from a business to business aspect. I'm a fucking consumer first. I don't run a business in cannabis. I'm a consumer. As a consumer, this is jacked up. You're confusing the element. And my wife will say all the time, being in Wisconsin, she's like, it's all the alcohol guys that are keeping us out of the way, because they know cannabis is going to pass them. They know cannabis is better. They're keeping them out of the way. I go back to mom. My government's full of mom, okay? A bunch of conservatives who don't want to see past reality and somehow can't even see the financial aspect, which is something I thought we could all, no matter what you were politically, you could wrap your head around the fact that your kid's school could be upgraded without your taxes going up or without more things to us as individual users if you were just to welcome a plant. So yeah, I am not talking, and I hope my audience knows this. When we're talking about hemp, you're talking about agricultural pieces of the puzzle. I don't want to hear about Delta. I don't want to hear about your CBDNs. I don't give a shit about all the little things you guys can talk about. Consumers know cannabis and they know hemp. And the problem is no one's making it clear where the division is.
Right. And I would add to that, there's bad actors that are definitely enjoying that gray area and exploiting that. And that's all well and good from a bottom line. But if we're not regulating those products, we're not protecting consumers.
Nope.
We're misleading them, first of all, as far as what it is they're putting into their bodies. Mm-hmm. And there's probably not a million different ways to make these products, but there's a lot. And when you start investigating how you can break a molecule apart or remove a single carbon from a molecule,
butane and add fire and add things that are going to break things down, and no one ever has to talk about it. We
these
only
are not
know because we live here.
You don't want that in your body. Yeah,
exactly. And there's not the education, Hunter, isn't existent right now. Okay, we let off this season with Joe Hades geez, come on, it's going to come to me here, Colorado. Wana Brands. He just took over the CEO of Wana Brands, and he led our season off. And he talked about how he really thought in 2014 that moms were going to give up the wine box and go into the dispensary, but that it never happened. And he started saying, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Are you kidding me? Mom's terrified. Mom thinks there's a guy out front with a fucking gun to get in. She's not going to go there with her minivan or kid parked out front, okay?
And leave her kids in the car while she goes in there? No.
She can't. And if someone took a picture of her, my God, she would be vilified in her community and she could never go outside again. So the community has the same issue, but we think we've created this safe space because as an industry, and I look at it from the inside out, so you guys can hit me up with all your nasty DMs, but you guys are not seeing the forest through the trees. The people who live it every day, you're just seeing the infighting and the arguing about hemp this. Look, I get the cannabis guy's point, Hunter. They paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to sell cannabis legally, and someone's coming in just under the radar at the grocery store doing the same thing. I get it. I get it. Y'all put yourself here because y'all didn't get together and work to say, let's do the plant right? That's what we try to do here on this show. The goal of this show is to remove the stigma and uplift the plant, the whole plant.
And Sean, to that point, being in Colorado, one of the most frustrating things, because there's a clear dichotomy in policy and the way we approach regulation if you have a legal marijuana program or if you don't. And I'll tell you, states that don't are far more likely to embrace intoxicating hemp products. I hate those words, but
all day, every day. That's all I see, Hunter.
But then here in Colorado, the dispensaries started playing in this, how much THC needs to be in a product to move it into the dispensary. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that it was an unintended consequence. I really hope that they never realized the impact they were going to have on the patient community. I mean, the medical refugees who have come to Colorado, right, in 2014 are now experiencing that the products that farmers spent 5-10 years developing their genetics so that they would have a very specific profile for their patients are now being told that they have to use isolated CBD in order to change the ratio in those products. I lost farmers the day that happened because they said, after all these years of dedicating our work to this plant for these results for the whole plant, now we have to take an isolate and add it to it in order to have it on the shelf in the grocery store where it had been for 4 years, right next to all of the other tinctures and oils and, homeopathic health products that we have. It's a crazy scenario.
It is absolutely wild. And I have a feeling we're going to get into even more of it in the second half. So speaking of the second half, as we get ready to do that, Hunter, what are we going to be talking about in the second half? What's the overview?
Oh boy, I am so excited to talk with you about global sustainability and how cannabis and hemp is driving just a new perspective of how we think about bio-based products, and also talk about what is missing in this global perspective. Because if we don't engage farmers, we don't actually have food or bio-based products. There's a lot of things that just go away without supporting the farmer. So as great as it is to see us working on sustainability, we still got a few things that we need to work on.
I love it. We're going to jump into it. I cannot wait. I'm a big sustainability guy. But those of you who know me, I'm not talking about EVs because I don't think that has anything to do with sustainability. But we're going to be talking about agricultural sustainability, way more important to me as a Wisconsin kid. As we close out the show, it has happened again. Mandy Lyle and Potency 710 strike again. She's giving away 20% off everyone's first order who's seeing the show today, period. Doesn't matter. Head over to potency710.com. Use the code podcast710 at checkout to get your 20% off. It's worth it. And Mandy, thank you again for that. That offer is valid through October 1st at this point. Thank you all so much for joining the show. And you better tune in to part 2 because it is going to be rowdy. Thank you so much. And remember, remove the stigma, uplift the plant should be the goal of us all.